Hello again, this is Dave Thomas, and today I'm building the Aztec two-stage model rocket produced by Custom Rockets. And this is not what you want to do if this is your first ever rocket, but it is a good progression after you've built a few single-stage rockets and want to try multi-staging. Taking a look at the parts list here that's part of the instruction sheet, we have a large BT50 body tube. This will be the main body tube here. We have a smaller body tube, and this will be for the booster. Okay, we have a sheet of fin stock, and mine are all broken apart in transit, but they're all here, so you should have a total of 6 fins in that fin stock. Alright, self-adhesive decal, the nose cone, and the base of the nose cone is in one of the small parts packages. So we've got this small parts package, and I don't know why they put them together this way, but this is the base of the nose cone, the coupler for the stage, and then the motor mount for the booster stage. And then the rest of the motor mount materials are in this little package. So it's got the centering rings for both stages, another motor mount for the upper stage, and then the launch lug is also in this, as well as the thrust ring for the upper stage. And then finally we have an elastic shock cord. For recovery, we have this long skinny streamer, and as we get into installing this, you might want to consider using either a wider streamer, so if, for example, you could use 2-inch crepe paper, or even a small parachute. This kit's kind of right on the verge of having safe landings with a streamer versus a parachute. Okay, but that'll be up to you. So it looks like all of the parts that are supposed to be here are here, so I'm going to clear things away and we will get started. Now, before I get into starting the build, I do want to talk a little bit about the fins here. They're fairly thick and they're balsa, and so being balsa, they tend to have a fairly deep, coarse grain to them. And so if you want to do some sort of sanding sealer or other fin treatment, I suggest doing that ahead of time so that the fins have time to dry and you can sand them again before we actually get to the point of putting the fins on. If you're not going to do any treatment to your fins, then don't worry about this particular part and we'll just go on with the build. Our first step is to assemble the booster stage engine mount, and so that's going to be in one of these small parts packages, and it's the shorter of the two motor mount tubes. So we're going to need that tube, and then in the other small parts package we have the centering rings. So we'll need 2 of those. Alright, I'm just going to dry fit things here to begin with. So that's supposed to go together like that, where the 2 rings will be flush with each end of the motor mount. And they suggest just dry fitting these on and then putting fillets on them. I prefer to actually have glue there. So I'm just going to back these in toward the middle a little bit. And then you can use white glue or wood glue. Okay, so I'm just going to run a quick bead of glue around here. This doesn't need to be really thick. Okay, and then I'm going to put down a little piece of wax paper here so I can just shove this down flush. Just like that, and pick it up. And then make sure there's no glue on the outside of the ring. And then wipe out any excess glue here. Make sure you don't have anything on the inside either. Okay, and then I can do that again. And once again, I'm just going to push that down flush. Wipe off the excess glue there. And then I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes before we go on to the next step. Once the ring glue is dry enough that they won't move as we handle it, we can go ahead and assemble the body tube for the booster stage. Okay, and what they're asking us to do is to put glue in both ends of this and then stuff this up through it. Okay, I'm going to do that a little bit differently here, and instead I'm going to use an applicator to put some glue up inside there. So if I put this beside it like this and use my thumb as a marker, alright, I'm going to go ahead and put the glue around the inside, and it's going to be close to the top but not actually there. Okay, and then I can push this in a little ways and then add some more glue to the inside here. And this is going to give us better glue contact all the way around instead of trying to push one big glob of glue all the way through the tube. Alright, now we're going to push this in and then also push that flush. Alright, and so you can see here where it's forced the glue forward, and that's going to give us a much stronger mount. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and put a little more glue on the inside here. And then the coupler will go in on top of that. Okay? So we can set this one aside to dry. And then we're going to move on to the second motor mount. Oops. So that's the longer one of the two. And the first thing we're going to do is take the engine block ring or thrust ring here, and that's just going to go flush in one end of the tube there. So again, I'm going to take some glue, put that just inside. Alright, attach that, press that flush there. And if you want, you can put a little bit more glue just right around the edge there. Okay, and just kind of smooth that in. And again, keep it off the outside, and you also don't want it to drip down inside there. And then we're going to measure from the opposite side, or opposite end here. So this end has my retainer, or my engine block in it. So from the opposite end, which will be the aft end of the motor mount, we're going to measure 3/4 of an inch. Right there. Okay, then we're going to take the other two rings, and they're doing these just like before, so they want us to put these in place and then put fillets on them. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the other one, is push them forward into the glue. Alright, so this one has to go at this point. I'm going to move that back a little bit there. Okay, and since I've already got an applicator going, I'll just use it. So just run some glue around there. And I'm going to push that up to my mark. And any excess glue there, I can fill it around. Like that. Okay, again, keep any glue off the outside of the ring. And then with this one, okay, once more, some glue around that, and this one's going to get pushed up flush, like that, and go ahead and just wipe off the excess glue. Okay, and we're going to let that dry for a few minutes before we put it up inside the body tube. Okay, once again, the glue is dry enough that the rings aren't going to move on this. So now I'm going to take the main body tube and I'm going to write aft on one end so I don't get it confused later. And this is going to go up inside and mount flush with the aft end of the body tube. And so here again, kind of like what I did with the motor mount on the booster, I'm going to take some glue on an applicator. Alright, measure just below that top one. Use my thumb as a marker. I'm just going to put that in and then up against the interior. Okay, I'm going to slide this in partially and then put some more glue on the inside before I slide the second part in. Okay, now I'm just going to slide that there, push that forward, and then push it flush. Now you do need to make sure that those two centering rings are dry enough, otherwise when you go to push this you may end up pushing the motor mount through the centering rings and changing the spacing here between the aft ring and the aft end of the body tube. And that's going to be critical when we go to put the stages together. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes, and while it's drying, we can go ahead and skip ahead a little bit here and do the nose cone. So for this you're going to need some tube type plastic model cement like this. If you don't have this, the gel type super glue is a second choice. Alright, so we're just going to run a bead of this around the inside edge. And don't use too much of this or you'll melt the nose cone and deform it. Alright, and then just take the base of the nose cone, put that on, give it a little twist. Okay, and then set that aside to dry as well. While we're waiting for the glue to dry in the motor mounts, we can go ahead and get started with the fins. Now, as I said, all of my fins were pretty much dislodged from the balsa sheet during shipping of the package. If yours have not, go ahead and just use your hobby knife to cut out the little nubbins here and release the fins. All these fins are the same shape, okay, so it doesn't matter which ones you use on which stage. But you will want to take, I'm going to do them 3 at a time just so I don't make as many mistakes. But kind of line those all up, and then you can just take a small sheet of sandpaper, this is 100 grit, and just sand the collective edges to remove any of those nubs that are still left. And basically go through the charred part there. And it's only going to take a stroke or two on each edge. Okay, and then go ahead and do that for the other 3. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, if you want to use sanding sealer or any other type of fin treatment, now is the time to do that. For this video, I'm going to leave the fins unsealed, although I will sand them well. And so, for the sanding part of that, you're going to want either 150 or 220 grit sandpaper. And the first thing we want to do is sand all the faces. Now, if your fins are still attached to the entire stock sheet and they haven't fallen out yet, you can actually do this all at once while they're still in the sheet. But otherwise, just take your sandpaper, sand with the grain, smooth out each face. Okay, and then once you have that done for the fin there, you can also decide how much streamlining you want to put in. So if you want really, really high performance, then what we want to do is round off this edge and then taper the trailing edge And then you can either leave the tip edge straight or put a taper in it as well. And the same thing back here for this inner trailing edge. This will be against the rocket like this. Okay. You can either leave this straight or taper it as well. The drawback to doing that is any place you have those tapered down to a knife edge, they're going to be really brittle, and so this often cracks or chips the fins when the rocket lands. And so if you want a sturdier fin, go ahead and still round the leading edge, but leave all the other edges square. And that's what I'm going to do on this one. So I'm going to start by just sanding in the edges a little bit. Alright, and then periodically checking the cross section. And then you just kind of rock over as you sand. This is really soft balsa, so it shouldn't take too much to do it. Okay, and then again, checking cross section from both ends. Look down so you can actually see a flat spot there yet that needs rounding. Alright, once more check the cross section and the front. Okay, and then here I'm just going to use the finer sandpaper now to square up the other edges. Okay, and our root edge, the one that has the little tick mark burnt into it, that's what's going to go against the rocket. Make sure that's good and square no matter what you do to the rest of the edges. Okay, so that's one fin there. I'm going to do the other 5 fins off camera and then come back. Now to mark the fins, we're going to use this template here within the instructions, and go ahead and put the 2 stages together here. And just ignore these lines, I was doing something else with them. Doing a little experimenting on marking this thing. And this is the best way I think to do it. Okay, so once you have the 2 stages together, go ahead and then mark on the booster where each one of those fins is going to go. Oops. Don't want to turn that. I need to turn me. And then when we go to draw the fin lines, we'll do it with the entire tube here. And that way, this will ensure that the fins on the sustainer are exactly lined up to the fins on the booster. Now, like I said, I've got lines on here, but in just a moment I'll show you how to do it. Now I'm going to use this tube marking guide by Estes to mark my fin lines, but if you don't have this, you can use a door frame or a drawer. Okay, so I'm just going to stick this in here. Find it there. Alright, so I'm going to find my mark that I made using the fin guide and the instructions, and now I'm going to go from about a quarter way up the main body tube and come all the way down through both. So now I've got a line going all the way down there. Okay, and then just turn to the next one, do the same thing. And go all the way around. Okay, now before we put the tubes completely away here, before we put the fins on, I want us to come down and do a mark here. So they just have you eyeballing where the launch lug is going to go. I prefer to have a little bit more exact location here. So first I'm just going to pick somewhere between 2 of my fin lines and just eyeball in a little spot there. And then I'm going to use my fin marking guide again. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a line all the way up the body tube. That'll just give me an easy sight line. Okay, and then 3 inches from the aft end is where that needs to go. Okay, so the aft end of the launch lug will be at that 3-inch mark. So I'll just put that right there. Okay, and now when I come back to do the launch lug, it'll be easier to see where it goes. Okay, now to attach the fins, we're going to start here with the upper stage. And if you want, you can roughen the cardboard here along those lines a little bit. So here this is going to attach so that the edge of the root edge would be flush with the aft end of the rocket, and so the fin will extend down from that point. Okay, so if I put that against there, I'm just going to make myself another little mark here at the tip. Okay, then you can take some sandpaper here and just lightly sand this. And you don't have to do a whole lot. Even just a couple of strokes here. And all I'm doing is breaking up the glossy finish there and giving the glue a better spot to hold on. Okay, and then I'm going to come up here and do the same thing where my launch lug is going to be. Alright. And now using white glue or wood glue, I'm going to run a bead of glue here right along the root edge. And you don't want this to be really thick. Okay, and now I'm going to take this, alright, and put it right up against my fin line there. And again, we want this to come down like approximately right there. Now I'm going to pull this off, and I'm going to let it get tacky for 30 to 60 seconds, and then we'll put it back on. Okay, these have gotten tacky, and I can put them back together again. Alright, and then I'm going to check and make sure that the fin is straight and parallel with the tube and perpendicular to it, which it appears everything is good there. Let this dry for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you can repeat with the other fins all around the upper stage. While the fin is drying on the upper stage, we can also do the lower stage here and kind of alternate between them. So just like we did at the upper stage, start with a bead of glue on the fin. Smooth that out a little bit, it's kind of lumpy. Okay, and in the same way, this is going to fit with this angle here at the root edge, flush with the aft end. Okay, and again, apply that, wait 30 to 60 seconds to allow it to get tacky, and then come back. My glue is tacked up a little bit, so once again I'm going to put this back on, and just like with the upper stage, make sure that it is parallel to the tube, lengthwise and perpendicular to it coming out. Alright, and also then let this dry 5 to 10 minutes and move on to the next one. And I'm going to do the remainder of the fins for both stages off camera. Once the glue is dry on the fins, then we can go ahead and put on the launch lug. So we'll come back to our line here that we drew earlier. And then just put a bead of glue on the launch lug. Okay, and just put a bead of glue on the launch lug here. And then put that in place on our line. Okay, and this is why I like to have the line extending all the way down the rocket, as it makes it easier to sight where that launch lug needs to be. Okay, so looking down, it should align with the line there. Mine is kind of just a little bit off. Okay, and then also sight down through the launch lug and the line. That's still a little bit off there. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Now we'll allow this to dry, and after the launch lug is done, we can apply fillets to all of the fins and to the launch lug. Now that the glue on the fins is dry, we can go ahead and add fillets here. And so I'm just going to add a bead of glue along the base of each fin. And I like to do facing fins at the same time there. Okay, and so just take your finger, smooth those in. Okay, and then we can turn and go on to the next one. And as long as you let this dry horizontally, you can usually just do all the fins at once and they won't drip. If you let it dry vertically, the glue will tend to run in the direction of gravity. Having the fillets here helps reinforce the structural integrity of the fins, as well as increasing the aerodynamics and reducing interference drag. Once this dries, if you decide you want thicker fillets, you can add another coat of glue, or what I like to use is plastic model contour putty like this to build up the fillets when I want that. You don't want to just make a big heavy line of glue though, because it will bulge and run and bubble and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside to dry, and I'm going to do the fillets for the upper stage off camera, but they're done in the same manner. Here my glue fillets are done, and according to the instructions, they go ahead and have you paint and finish and decal the rocket at this point, and then finish off the assembly with the nose cone and shock cord and streamer at the very last. And that's really not a bad idea. That way you're not having to worry about whether the shock cord's in the way and such. For the purposes of this video though, I am not going to paint the rocket as part of the video. So I'm going to go ahead and move ahead to the final assembly steps here. So we need to cut out the shock cord mount that's found here on the front of the instructions. And I want to just make sure that I'm not going to cut out something I need later. Okay, it all looks fine there. So I'm just going to take my hobby knife. You can also use scissors for this. And just cut that out. Okay, now if you look at the way they fold the shock cord here, I'm going to do it just a little bit differently, but it pretty much comes out the same in the end. And the reason I do it this way instead of the way they show it is it doesn't bunch up the shock cord as much, so you don't have a big projection inside the tube. Use white glue or wood glue and just run a bead right down the length here, not quite to the end. And now I'm going to take my shock cord here and put it over the 2 and the 3 regions here, and I'm doing it at an angle. And this is so when we fold this up over itself, most of the shock cord will lay beside itself and not on top of it. Okay, now just take the 1, move it over the 2, Alright, and we want the glue to get spread all over underneath that. So we just have a nice sandwich of glue, paper, and shock cord. Alright, and then we're going to move that up over the 3. And again, we want to make this so that most of the shock cord that we just folded is laying beside the main part of it there. Okay, once again, go ahead and move that around. Try and squeeze out all the air bubbles. And I'm going to give this a bend. That, so it makes kind of a crescent shape. Okay, and now I'm going to put some more glue on top of that. Okay, you don't want this dripping, but you do want it to be nice and evenly spread around. Again, so that when this goes into the rocket, we don't have air bubbles in there. We want good contact between the glue and the paper and the rocket. Okay, now we're going to take the upper stage here and just slide this in to begin with. Okay, and this needs to be a good 1.5 inches or more down into the body tube so that it doesn't interfere with the nose cone. Alright, and I'm now pushing on the shock cord mount against the bottom side of the tube and supporting that with my hand here so that I can apply a lot of pressure and get that nice and flat. Okay, you can probably just barely see it in there. Okay, and this is really a heavy-duty shock cord for such a light rocket. Okay, now you're going to take the nose cone on the other end, pass the shock cord through, and just tie a double knot in it. Now, since I am going to take this apart once more when I go to finish the rocket, I'm not going to cinch this down completely. I just want to show you what's going on. Okay. If you're ready to put this on permanently, go ahead and pull this from every direction that you can, get that knot cinched down really good and tight. And then I recommend putting just a little drop of white glue or wood glue on that to keep the knot from coming undone. Okay. The other thing you want to check for when you got this all done, put that knot back, is once you get that completely cinched down, trim off the excess over here. You don't want to do it all the way back to the knot. Leave about 5 or 6 millimeters, about 1/4 inch. But we don't want this to happen where that little bit of shock cord can get in between the shoulder and the body tube, because that can prevent the ejection system from deploying properly. Okay, and then for the streamer here, okay, they actually show tying the streamer through the eyelet here as well, and that's one way you can do it. Another is to tape it to the shock cord. Okay, so you just take it something like that, and then you can put some clear tape over that. Okay, so what I like to do is put that right on the edge there, and then my tape, I'm going to leave a fair amount of space on that. So here we got a lot of overlap space here. And I'm going to fold that completely over the shock cord, and then catch the other side of the streamer with it. Okay. And then all we need to do is you just take the streamer, instead of trying to roll it up from one end, just make several lengthwise folds over itself. And this is going to get it down to a manageable length. Alright, and then once you get it fairly small, you can roll up the last of that. Okay, and then if you're actually prepping this for launch, add 2 to 3 pieces of recovery wadding down the tube, and then this whole assembly here of the shock cord and the streamer. Okay, I'm not going to do it now because my shock cord mount is still wet, and then this all can go together. Okay. With that, this rocket is structurally complete. As I said, I'm not going to paint this one on video, but I hope you had fun doing this, and it's actually a relatively simple rocket to put together and launch. So have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.